March 15th, 2027. The day Earth learned it was not alone in the universe. The day humanity learned that being alone might have been safer. 1,847 warships materialized above Earth's atmosphere in the span of 7 minutes. Not gradually, not with warning. One moment the orbital space around the planet belonged to weather satellites in the International Space Station. The next moment, it belonged to them. The ships were massive. Each one dwarfed the largest aircraft carrier ever built by human hands. Their hulls absorbed light rather than reflecting it, creating dark wounds in the star field behind them. They moved with impossible precision, settling into a formation that surrounded the entire planet like a closing fist. At NORAD, buried deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, alarm systems that had never been designed to trigger all activated simultaneously. The sound was deafening. The implications were worse. 23 satellites went dark in the first 8 minutes. Not destroyed, disabled, paralyzed by some kind of directed energy that left them tumbling uselessly in their orbits, their solar panels intact, but their electronics completely fried. It was a demonstration, a statement. We can reach you whenever we want. We're choosing not to kill you yet. At 9 minutes and 42 seconds after first contact, every communication device on Earth capable of receiving a signal began broadcasting the same message. Televisions, radios, cell phones, and emergency broadcast systems, even car stereos and Bluetooth speakers that had been turned off, powered on by themselves, commandeered by a technology so far beyond human understanding that it might as well have been magic. The voice that spoke was not human. It couldn't be. The translation was flawless, delivered simultaneously in every language spoken on Earth, but underneath the words was something else. Something that bypassed linguistics entirely and communicated directly to the primal part of the human brain that understood when a predator was near. People of Earth, you have been evaluated by the Galactic Dominion. Your world possesses resources we require. Your species lacks the technological capability to resist integration into our empire. You have 72 standard hours to signal your unconditional surrender. Refusal will result in the sterilization of your planet. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. You have 72 hours. The transmission ended. The commandeered devices powered down. Across the planet, in every language, in every home, 8 billion people sat in absolute silence processing the same thought. We have 3 days left. Aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, Supreme Commander Zarketh Vorm stood before the tactical display with the satisfaction of someone completing a routine task. His sensory tendrils flickered with contentment as he watched the holographic representation of Earth rotate slowly beneath the formation of his fleet. Primitive, laughably primitive. The council chamber was vast, designed to accommodate the Dominion's multi-species command structure. Zarketh's 4 primary appendages rested easily on the interface console. His exoskeleton, dark blue and traced with the silver markings of his rank, reflected the soft glow of the tactical displays. 340 standard cycles of life, 60 years by human reckoning, and not one of those years had been wasted. The ultimatum has been delivered. Fleet Marshal Drakvin's voice carried the aggressive edge that had made him valuable in conquest after conquest. His 4 eyes gleamed with anticipation. Standard protocol. They always surrender within 48 hours. The smart ones do it in 24. Zarketh allowed himself a moment of reflection. 47 worlds, 47 conquests. His record was unblemished. Perfect. Other commanders had setbacks. Other commanders lost ships. Other commanders faced resistance that required actual strategic thinking. Not Zarketh Vorm. He had refined the protocol to an art form. Appear. Demonstrate overwhelming force. Issue ultimatum. Accept surrender. Move to next target. It worked because it was true. The Dominion possessed technology that made resistance impossible. Energy shields that could absorb nuclear detonations. Plasma weapons that could vaporize cities from orbit. Faster than light travel that allowed reinforcement from across the galaxy. What could any primitive species possibly do against that science director? Zarketh gestured to Xylaris, whose scales shimmered in the muted colors of concentration. Present the tactical assessment of Earth's defensive capabilities. Xylaris manipulated the holographic interface with practiced precision. Data streams materialized in the air above the command table. Primitive chemical propulsion for their spacecraft. Nuclear weapons that they appear to consider devastating, though they lack any delivery system capable of reaching our vessels at this altitude. No energy shielding, no plasma weaponry, no faster-than-light capability. They achieved their first orbital satellite 69 years ago. By Dominion standards, they are in the early stages of space exploration. Any signs of advanced defensive preparations? This from Corval, the security commander whose role required paranoia even when it wasn't warranted. Zolaris' scales flickered through a pattern that indicated uncertainty, for just a moment, then returned to their normal hue. Their orbital infrastructure is more extensive than typical for their technological level. They maintain a space station that seems unnecessarily large for a species at their stage of development. However, scans indicate it's used for scientific research. Nothing weaponizes. Unnecessarily large, Corval's battle armor made a grinding sound as he shifted position. Define unnecessary. For comparison, species at similar technological development typically maintain orbital platforms 1/10 the size. The human station is extensive, but again, all scans indicate scientific purposes only. Biological experiments, materials research, long-duration habitation studies. Zarketh waved a dismissive appendage. Irrelevant. Perhaps they're more curious than other species. Perhaps they waste resources on prestige projects. It doesn't matter. What matters is they have no capability to resist. Science Director, do you concur with that assessment? The pause was barely perceptible. Their development curve is unusual, Commander. Most species follow logarithmic progression. Steady advancement over millennia, but Earth's technological growth appears to be exponential. They went from horse-drawn transportation to nuclear weapons in 150 years, from no flight capability to landing on their own moon in 66 years. That level of acceleration is unprecedented in Dominion records. Unprecedented doesn't mean threatening. Drakvan's impatience was palpable. It means chaotic, reckless. They advance without discipline or planning. That makes them dangerous to themselves, not to us. Zarketh considered this. Zolaris was the most thorough analyst he'd ever worked with. If she noted something unusual, it deserved consideration. But unusual wasn't the same as threatening. Unusual was interesting. A footnote for the historical archives. Nothing more. Your concern is noted and logged, Science Director. However, I see nothing in this data that suggests we should deviate from standard protocol. They will be given their 72 hours. They will deliberate. They will recognize the futility of resistance. They will surrender. He straightened to his full height, 8 feet of certainty. Fleet Marshal, when they signal their acceptance, you will coordinate the integration process. I want this concluded efficiently. And if they refuse, Corval asked. The question was academic. In 47 conquests, refusal had occurred exactly twice. Both times, a single demonstration of force, the atomization of an uninhabited moon, had immediately reversed the decision. Species that achieved space travel weren't suicidal. They understood mathematics. They could count ships and calculate outcomes. If they refuse, Zarketh said calmly, we will demonstrate our capabilities by destroying their largest city. They will then surrender. This is not complicated, Commander Corval. We have done this 47 times before. 47. Drakvan's voice carried satisfaction. And Earth will be 48. Another perfect conquest for your record, Supreme Commander. Zarketh felt his sensory tendrils ripple with pleasure. Yes, 48. The number had a certain appeal. And this one would be particularly easy. No advanced defenses, no allies to call for help, no last-minute technological revelations. Just a primitive species facing the inevitable and making the intelligent choice. There is one item of note, Zolaris interjected. The humans have requested permission to send a representative to discuss terms. The council chamber filled with the Dominion equivalents of laughter, a chittering, buzzing sound that made the air vibrate. Discuss terms, as if they had any leverage whatsoever, as if this was a negotiation between equals rather than a surrender to the inevitable. They want to negotiate. Drakvan's amusement was evident. What exactly do they think they have to negotiate with? Apparently, Zolaris consulted her data streams. They believe they can convince us to reconsider our approach. Their message specifically requested a formal diplomatic meeting to present alternative solutions. More laughter. Even Corval, normally humorless, allowed himself a grinding sound of amusement. Zarketh considered the request. Standard protocol didn't include diplomatic meetings. Standard protocol was surrender or die. But there was precedent for allowing conquered species to feel heard. It made the integration process smoother. Let them think they had some agency in their own subjugation. Let them believe their words mattered. And truthfully, it might be entertaining. Grant their request, Zarketh decided. Let them send their representative. We will receive them in this chamber. Perhaps we can even record the meeting for the archives. Future conquests always appreciate seeing how their predecessors groveled. When should we expect them? Corval asked. They indicated their representative can arrive within 12 standard hours, Zalaris reported. 12 hours. Fast. Most species spent their precious deadline time in panic or mounting futile defensive preparations. The humans were responding with diplomacy immediately. Either they were remarkably pragmatic or they'd already calculated the hopelessness of their situation. Smart Zarketh thought, they're smart enough to know when they're beaten. This will be over quickly. Very well. 12 hours. Prepare the chamber for a diplomatic reception, and Corval scan their vessel thoroughly when it approaches. Let's not have any surprises. Should we be concerned about weapons? Corval's paranoia was predictable. Zarketh's sensory tendrils rippled with amusement. What are they going to do? Security commander throw rocks at us. It was a joke. A dismissive comment born of absolute confidence. Looking back, Zarketh would remember that moment as the last time he felt certain about anything regarding Earth. He would remember it as the moment his perfect record began to crack. 6,000 miles below in a reinforced bunker beneath the Pentagon ambassador, Dr. Catherine Valeris sat alone in a preparation room staring at her father's watch. The watch was old, mechanical, the kind of timepiece that required winding, that gained or lost a few seconds every day, that had no business existing in an age of atomic precision. But it had belonged to her father, and her father had worn it through 37 bombing missions over Germany in 1944, and it had never stopped working. She wound it now, feeling the familiar resistance of the spring, listening to the quiet tick that had outlived the man who first wore it. In 3 hours, she would board a shuttle to meet with the alien fleet. In 3 hours, she would either save humanity or confirm its doom. The weight of 8 billion lives pressed down on her shoulders like a physical thing, but her hands didn't shake. 42 years old. The last 20 of them spent preparing for this exact moment. Not hoping for it, preparing for it. Because Catherine Valeris and the small group of people who knew what Project Sentinel really was had never believed humanity would remain alone in the universe. They'd never believed that silence from the stars meant safety. They'd believed the opposite. They'd believed that one day someone would come, and when they came, they wouldn't come in peace. A knock at the door. General Harlan Thorne entered without waiting for permission. 58 years old, silver-haired, with eyes that had seen too many wars and expected to see one more before he died. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The man who'd turned Project Sentinel from a theoretical exercise into operational reality. The shuttle's ready, he said quietly. Crew's on board. Mercer will pilot you up. Kate nodded, still looking at the watch. Did the calculations finish? Yes. Thorne's voice was carefully neutral. If they fire on our orbital platforms, we can take out 40% of their fleet before they adapt. 60% if we get lucky. But we'd lose every major city in the process. Casualties projected between 500 million and 2 billion, depending on how surgical they decide to be. And if we launch everything immediately first strike, we might get to 50%, but they'd still have enough firepower to sterilize the planet. It buys us nothing except ensuring mutual destruction. Kate finally looked up from the watch. Good. Thorne raised an eyebrow. Good. They need to believe we're willing to do it, that we'll pull the trigger even knowing we lose. Because if they don't believe that, none of this works. Kate. Thorne sat down across from her, his voice dropping even lower. What you're about to do, there's no precedent for this. No training. No simulation that can prepare you for walking into that room and trying to convince beings that could wipe us out with a thought that they should be afraid of us. I know. If you can't sell it, I'll sell it. Kate's voice was steel, absolute, certain. I've been practicing this pitch for 20 years, Harlan. I know every word, every gesture, every pause. I know when to show strength and when to show certainty and when to show the kind of smile that makes people wonder what you're not telling them. And if they call the bluff, then we find out if it was a bluff or not. She stood fastening the watch around her wrist. Either way, they'll know we're not the easy conquest they think we are. Thorne stood as well, studying her face, looking for cracks, looking for fear, finding neither. You know that shuttle is intentionally primitive, right? We stripped out everything that might look advanced. It's going to be a rough ride up. I know, that's the point. Let them think we're desperate. Let them think we're coming to beg. She picked up the leather briefcase that contained her tablet and nothing else. No weapons, no hidden technology, just information. The last thing they're expecting is someone who walks in there and tells them to surrender. You really think that's going to work? Kate paused at the door, looking back at the general, who'd bet everything on a plan that required perfect execution and nerves of absolute steel. I think we're about to find out what happens when you judge a species by their technology instead of their determination. Kate, she stopped. Your father would be proud. For just a moment, the steel cracked. Just a moment. Then it was back harder than before. He'd probably tell me I'm insane. Then he'd ask if I needed him to fly the mission. She touched the watch. Let's go find out if I inherited anything useful from him besides this. The shuttle was exactly as promised. Crude, boxy, held together with rivets and welds that were visible to the naked eye. It looked like something from the 1960s, which was intentional. Let the aliens see human desperation. Let them see primitive technology barely capable of reaching orbit. Let them underestimate what that technology was hiding. Captain Dylan Mercer was already in the pilot's seat running pre-flight checks. 31 years old, Space Command's best shuttle pilot, with hands steady enough to dock with a tumbling satellite and nerves tested enough to fly a diplomatic mission that could end in instantaneous death. Ambassador, he acknowledged as she strapped into the co-pilot seat. Captain, are we ready? Mechanically? Yes, psychologically. He glanced at her. Ma'am, you're about to fly into an alien fleet that could vaporize us before we even reach their flagship. If you want to back out, now's the time. Kate looked out through the reinforced viewport at the sky that was about to become very hostile territory. Captain Mercer, I'm about to walk into a room full of beings who've conquered 47 worlds and tell them that Earth is about to be their first failure. If I was the type to back out, I wouldn't have volunteered for this in the first place. Mercer allowed himself a small smile. Fair enough. Initiating launch sequence. The shuttle lifted off with the grace of a brick thrown skyward. Intentional. Everything about this approach was intentional. Looked primitive, looked desperate, looked like a species that knew it was beaten and was trying one last futile gambit. And then when they were least expecting, it showed them what desperation had built in 30 years of preparation. The journey to the flagship took 47 minutes, long enough for Kate to review her tablet one final time, memorizing numbers she already knew by heart. 2,340 kinetic kill vehicles, 847 orbital nuclear platforms. Targeting solutions calculated to 17 decimal places. 30 years of work, trillions of dollars disguised as space exploration. The largest covert military operation in human history, all of it depending on whether she could sell the most important lie of her life. Or was it a lie that was the beautiful part? The part that would make this work if anything would. She wasn't entirely sure herself what was real and what was theater. And if she wasn't sure, how could they be? The flagship loomed ahead, massive, dark, absorbing light like a wound in space. The shuttle looked like an insect approaching a whale. Docking clearance received, Mercer reported. They're bringing us in with a tractor beam. I have no control. Expected, let them think they're in control. The shuttle was pulled into a docking bay that could have held 50 vessels its size. The bay doors closed behind them with the finality of a tomb ceiling. Through the viewport, Kate could see shapes moving in the shadows. Alien shapes. Armed. Last chance to reconsider, Mercer said quietly. Kate unfastened her restraints and picked up her briefcase. Captain, if I'm not back in 2 hours, execute Protocol Terminus. Mercer's face went pale. Protocol Terminus was the last option. The one that meant Kate was dead and negotiations had failed and humanity was going to take as many of them down as possible before the end. Ma'am, 2 hours, Captain. Not 1 minute more. She opened the shuttle door and stepped into alien territory. The docking bay was cold. The air had a strange smell like ozone and something organic she couldn't identify. The shapes she'd seen through the viewport resolved into security officers, heavily armed. Their armor gleamed under harsh lighting that seemed designed to intimidate. One of them approached, 8 feet tall, 4 arms covered in some kind of exoskeleton that might have been biological or might have been armor. Impossible to tell. When it spoke, its voice was translated by technology Kate couldn't see. Ambassador Valeris, you will be escorted to the council chamber. You will not deviate from the designated route. You will not touch any ship systems. Compliance is not optional. Understood. Kate's voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone attending a business meeting, not someone facing potential execution. Lead the way. The walk through the ship took 12 minutes, long corridors that curved in ways that suggested the ship was even larger than it appeared from outside. Lighting that shifted in spectrum as they moved, creating shadows that seemed to move with predatory intent. Alien crew members stopping to stare at the human who was either very brave or very foolish. Kate kept her eyes forward, her pace steady. Her briefcase held casually like it contained nothing more important than quarterly reports. The council chamber doors opened with a sound like thunder. The room beyond was vast, designed to hold hundreds, currently occupied by 5. The Dominion's command staff arrayed around a holographic display table that showed Earth rotating slowly in 3-dimensional detail. At the center stood Supreme Commander Zarketh Vorm, 8 feet of confidence and casual power. His sensory tendrils flickered in patterns Kate couldn't interpret. His 4 eyes tracked her approach with the attention of a predator evaluating prey. Kate walked to the center of the room with measured steps, not hurrying, not hesitating. When she reached a position directly across the table from Zarketh, she stopped, set down her briefcase, extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting, knowing they wouldn't understand it, but doing it anyway, and smiled. "Hello," she said, her voice clear and steady, through whatever translation technology the Dominion used. "I'm Dr. Catherine Valeris, United States Department of State. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." The silence that followed was absolute. The aliens stared at her with something approaching disbelief. This tiny creature, barely reaching the mid-thorax of the shortest being in the room, unarmed, unarmored, alone, was thanking them. Zarketh's sensory tendrils twitched in a pattern that might have been confusion. "Ambassador Valeris, you understand the situation your world faces?" "Yes, Commander. Total surrender within 60 hours or complete annihilation." "I understand perfectly." Her smile didn't waver. "That's precisely what I wanted to discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," the aggressive one said. Drakvin, according to the briefing materials, Fleet Marshal, impatient, dangerous when his pride was wounded. "Your species will submit to Dominion authority or you will be eliminated. These are your only options." Kate turned to face him directly, that smile still in place. That terrible, confident smile that suggested she knew something they didn't. "Fleet Marshal Drakvin, with all due respect to your 47 conquests and your impressive service record, I think you've fundamentally misunderstood the situation." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Misunderstood." Zarketh's voice carried a note of something that might have been curiosity or might have been the first hint of concern. Kate opened her briefcase, pulled out her tablet, set it on the holographic table. With a gesture, she activated it, and a star map appeared in the air above the table. Earth at the center, the Dominion fleet surrounding it, and beyond that in colors they would recognize the extent of their empire. "Yes, Commander, you see you've given Earth 72 hours to surrender. I'm here to offer you a counter-proposal." She met his eyes with absolute certainty. "You surrender to us within the next 72 hours, or we dismantle the Galactic Dominion piece by piece." The chamber went silent, not the anticipatory silence before violence, not the thoughtful silence of beings processing new information, the stunned absolute silence of minds that cannot quite process what they just heard. Drakvin made a choking sound. The Scaled One's color went pale. Even the security commander took a step backward. Kate let the silence stretch. Let them try to reconcile what she just said with everything they thought they knew about Earth. Then she tapped on her tablet again, and the star map changed. New icons appeared, trajectories, targeting solutions. Numbers that would mean nothing to most people, but everything to military commanders who understood orbital mechanics and weapons placement. "Let me clarify," she said, her voice still perfectly calm, still carrying that smile in its tone, even when her face had gone serious. "You've made several critical errors in your assessment of humanity. Errors that, quite frankly, are going to cost you everything if you don't correct them immediately." Zarketh found his voice. "You cannot be serious." "Deadly serious, Commander." Kate's eyes were steel now, cold and hard, and absolutely certain. "You scanned Earth and saw primitive technology. You saw chemical rockets and nuclear weapons and no faster than light capability. You concluded we were easy prey." She advanced slightly, her small frame somehow commanding the massive room. "What you failed to ask was the right question. You never wondered why a species at our technological level has a space station, why that station is unnecessarily large, why we maintain an orbital infrastructure far beyond what our development curve should support." The Scaled One's Alaris made a sound. "You said it was for scientific research." "And it is." Kate's smile returned, sharp now, dangerous. The science of killing beings who come to our world thinking they can take it. She tapped the tablet one more time. The holographic display zoomed in on Earth's orbital space, and surrounding the planet like a crown of thorns, 2,340 points of light appeared. Those, Kate said quietly, are kinetic kill vehicles. Tungsten rods, each one 20 feet long, weighing 2 tons, positioned in orbital weapons platforms that you dismissed as communication satellites. No explosives, no power source, no energy signature that your scans would register as a threat. She looked at each of them in turn. Just mass and velocity, and gravity doing what gravity does best. We call them rods from God. Drop one from orbit, let physics handle the rest, and it hits with the force of a small nuclear weapon. No radiation, no fallout, just kinetic energy turning matter into plasma. Zarketh's sensory tendrils had gone completely still. You're lying. Am I? Kate's voice was ice. Science Director Zalaris, review your scans of our orbital satellites. Look specifically for dense metallic cores. Look for mass distribution that's inconsistent with communication equipment. Look for positioning that creates overlapping fields of fire covering approach vectors to our planet. She could see it happening. See Zalaris pulling up data. See the color draining from her scales. See the moment realization hit. They're there, the science director whispered. The mass signatures. I dismiss them as structural components. But if they're weapons, Kate confirmed. 2,340 of them. We've been building them for 30 years. And you never noticed because you were looking for sophisticated threats. You never considered that humans would weaponize gravity itself. The silence was different now. Heavier. Weighted with implications. That's barbaric, someone said. That's human, Kate corrected. We've been preparing for this moment since we first looked up at the stars and realized we weren't alone. We knew eventually someone would come. Someone always does. So we prepared. She straightened small but somehow dominating the room through sheer force of presence. Now, shall I tell you about the 847 nuclear warheads we have pointed at your fleet? Or should we discuss why you're going to accept my terms and withdraw peacefully? Zarketh stared at this impossible creature. This tiny being who had walked into his council chamber and systematically destroyed everything he thought he knew about Earth. His perfect record was cracking. And Catherine Valoris was just getting started. The holographic display cast strange shadows across Kate's face as she watched the aliens process what she just revealed. 2,340 points of light surrounded Earth like a defensive constellation, each one a weapon that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 decades. Zarketh's sensory tendrils had gone completely rigid, a defensive posture according to the xenobiology briefings Kate had studied. The Dominion commander was experiencing something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Uncertainty. Even if what you claim is true, he said carefully, each word measured, kinetic weapons are limited in scope. They require precise targeting. It can be evaded. You cannot threaten our entire fleet with orbital platforms designed to strike planetary targets. Kate's smile widened slightly. You're right, Commander. Kinetic weapons are best suited for surface targets, city-sized targets, stationary installations. She paused, letting the implication hang. That's why they're just Tier 1. She tapped her tablet. The holographic display shifted. New icons appeared in Earth's orbital space, smaller, more numerous, arranged in patterns that overlapped and intersected like a 3-dimensional net. 847 orbital nuclear platforms, Kate said quietly. Intercontinental ballistic missiles retrofitted with orbital thrusters and guidance systems. Each one equipped with a 15-megaton warhead. Each one currently locked onto a specific ship in your fleet. The silence was broken by Corval, the security commander, manipulating his own interface with movements that were too fast, too urgent. Numbers cascaded across his display. Trajectories, intercept calculations, probability matrices. His armor made a grinding sound as he froze. Confirmed, I'm detecting targeting locks. Multiple locks per vessel. Our flagship alone has 12 separate signatures. 12, Kate confirmed. Redundancy commander. In case you manage to shoot down the first 11. Though I should mention our projections suggest your point defense systems will intercept approximately 60% of our missiles. Maybe 65% if you're very, very good. Drakvin's voice was strained. That still leaves 35 to 40% impact rate, Kate finished, which by our calculations means you lose approximately 40% of your fleet before you fire a single shot in retaliation. 800 ships, gone. Just like that. She snapped her fingers. The sound was sharp in the massive chamber. Your empire loses half its strike force to a species that hasn't even achieved faster than light travel. Zolaris's scales were flickering through colors Kate had never seen in the briefing materials. Distress. Deep distress. This is... this is insane. You would sacrifice yourselves, destroy your own planet in a nuclear exchange. In a heartbeat, Kate said, and there was no smile now. Just cold, absolute certainty. Humanity has a saying, Science Director. If we're going down, we're taking you with us. We don't surrender. We don't submit. We fight until there's nothing left to fight with. And then we fight with whatever remains. She advanced a step closer to the holographic display. Her small frame cast a long shadow across the representation of Earth. You study species before you conquer them, don't you? You analyze their psychology, their decision-making patterns, their willingness to accept inevitable defeat. Another step. What did your analysis of humanity tell you, Commander Vorm? Zarketh didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried a note of something that might have been respect or might have been the first hint of fear. That you are fractious, divided, prone to internal conflict. That you lack the unity necessary for coordinated resistance. And that analysis was based on what? Our broadcast entertainment, our news media, the public-facing image we present to ourselves. Kate's laugh was short, sharp. Commander, you made the same mistake every conqueror makes. You assumed that because we fight amongst ourselves, we won't fight others. You failed to understand that we fight each other because we don't have anyone else to fight. Give us a common enemy and we unify faster than any species you've ever encountered. She pulled up new data on her tablet. Images began appearing in the holographic display. Military installations, naval fleets, ground forces, space assets, all bearing the flags of different nations, different alliances, different ideologies that should have made cooperation impossible. 72 hours ago, you broadcast your ultimatum. Within 6 hours, every major nation on Earth had suspended all hostilities with each other. Trade disputes resolved. Territorial conflicts frozen. Political divisions set aside. We formed a unified planetary command structure in less than 12 hours. Commander Vorm, it took you longer to achieve unity in this council chamber than it took humanity to unite an entire planet. Drakvin made a dismissive gesture. Panic, desperation, it won't last beyond the immediate crisis. You're right, it won't. Kate's voice was ice. But it doesn't need to last. It only needs to last long enough to ensure that if we die, you die with us. That's the beauty of mutually assured destruction, Fleet Marshal. It's a doctrine we perfected during our Cold War. The basic principle is simple. If you have the power to destroy me, and I have the power to destroy you, and we both know that neither of us can win, then nobody fights. She looked at each of them in turn, making eye contact, making sure they understood the weight of what she was saying. Except we adapted it for space warfare. We adapted it for a scenario where the enemy has technological superiority, where we can't win through strength alone. So we made sure that winning would cost you everything. Korval's voice was barely above a whisper. You're holding us hostage. No, Commander, we're giving you a choice, a rational choice between survival and mutual annihilation. Kate's tablet chimed. She glanced at it, then back at the aliens. But there's something else you need to understand, something that makes this situation even more complicated than you realize. The holographic display changed again. This time it showed a network, communication relays, broadcast stations, automated satellites positioned beyond Earth's orbit, data streams spreading outward from Earth like ripples in a pond. If you attack us, Kate said slowly, deliberately, making sure every word landed with full impact. Our final action before our civilization is destroyed will be to broadcast every single technical specification for every weapon system I've described. We have hardened transmission satellites positioned throughout the solar system with dead man switches. If Earth's command network goes dark, they activate automatically. Kinetic kill vehicles, orbital nuclear platforms, guidance systems, targeting algorithms, manufacturing processes, all of it, transmitted on every frequency we can access to every world within communication range. The implications hit them like a physical blow. Kate could see it in Zolaris's scales, which had gone completely gray, in Korval's sudden stillness, in the way Drakvin's 4 eyes widened in something approaching horror. You govern 47 worlds through technological superiority, Kate continued. You maintain your empire because the species you've conquered don't have the capability to resist. But what happens when they do? What happens when every subjugated world suddenly has access to weapons that can threaten your ships? Weapons that require no advanced technology to build, just mass velocity and basic orbital mechanics. Zarketh's voice was strained. You would destabilize the entire galactic order. We would give every conquered species the same choice you're giving us. Surrender or fight. Except now they can fight. Now they have weapons. Now your empire faces not one resistance, but dozens. Maybe hundreds if the knowledge spreads far enough. Kate's voice was relentless. Mathematical. Certain. How many of your 47 worlds do you think will stay conquered once they realize they can build kinetic kill vehicles? Once they understand that mutually assured destruction works just as well for them as it does for us? This is blackmail, someone said. Kate thought it might have been Zarketh, but his voice had gone hollow, defeated. This is negotiation, Kate corrected. You wanted to conquer Earth because we looked weak. We're showing you exactly why that was a catastrophically bad assessment. Now let me explain your actual options. She held up one finger. Option 1. You withdraw your fleet immediately. Leave our solar system. Never come back. In exchange, we don't vaporize 800 of your ships. We don't share our weapons technology. We pretend this embarrassing incident never happened. You maintain your empire. We maintain our independence. Everyone survives. A second finger. Option 2. You attack us. We destroy 40% of your fleet. Millions of humans die. Our cities burn. But we make sure we absolutely ensure that every species in communication range receives our weapons data before the end. Your empire faces system-wide rebellion. The Galactic Dominion collapses over the next 5 to 10 years as world after world builds weapons you can't defend against. You win the battle and lose everything else. A third finger. Kate's smile returned, that terrible, confident smile that suggested she was enjoying this far too much. Option 3. You surrender to us. Acknowledge that humanity is not to be conquered. Sign a mutual defense pact. Share your faster-than-light technology. In exchange, we help you maintain order in the Dominion. Because here's the thing, Commander, we are really, really good at warfare. Frighteningly good. We've been practicing on each other for thousands of years. Imagine what we could do with your technology and our strategic doctrine. Zarketh stared at her, at this impossible creature who had walked into his war council and systematically dismantled 47 conquests worth of certainty. You're insane. Probably, Kate agreed cheerfully, but I'm also right, and you know it. Every calculation you're running right now is showing you the same result. You can't win this. Not in any way that matters. She checked her father's watch. The mechanical movement was steady, reliable. Just like the man who'd worn it through 37 bombing missions and come home to tell his daughter stories about courage in the face of impossible odds. You gave us 72 hours to surrender, Commander. I'm giving you 72 minutes to decide which option you're going to choose. I suggest you use them wisely. The silence that followed was absolute. The kind of silence that comes when beings who've never experienced defeat suddenly understand what it feels like to be outmaneuvered, outthought, outsmarted by a species they dismissed as primitive. Kate picked up her tablet, placed it back in her briefcase with movements that were casual, unhurried, as if she'd just concluded a routine business meeting instead of threatening the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Oh, and Commander Vorm, one more thing. Zarketh's sensory tendrils twitched. Yes, Kate's smile was sharp enough to cut. Everything I've told you today, the kinetic weapons, the nuclear platforms, the information bomb, that's what we're willing to tell you. That's the technology we don't mind you knowing about. The capabilities we've revealed, because revealing them serves our strategic purpose. She let that hang in the air for 3 full seconds. Long enough for them to understand. Long enough for the implications to sink in. Imagine, she said softly, what we're keeping secret. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the massive chamber. Steady, certain, the sound of someone who'd just played the most important hand of her life and knew she'd played it perfectly. At the doorway, she paused, looked back over her shoulder. 72 minutes, Commander. The clock starts now. The doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. For exactly 12 seconds, nobody in the council chamber moved. 12 seconds of absolute stillness, while 5 of the most powerful beings in the Galactic Dominion tried to process what had just happened. Then Drakvin exploded. This is ridiculous! His voice was rage and wounded pride, and the fury of someone who'd just been humiliated by a creature a third his size. We're allowing ourselves to be intimidated by a single unarmed primitive. We have the most powerful military force in 7 sectors. We should vaporize their planet and be done with it, and lose 800 ships in the process. Corval's voice was quiet, controlled, the voice of someone running calculations and not liking the results. Fleet Marshal, I've completed preliminary probability matrices. If Earth launches even 50 nuclear weapons from orbital platforms, let alone 847, our point defense systems will intercept approximately 68%. A 68% is acceptable losses, Drakvin snapped. Acceptable, Corval's armor ground as he turned to face the Fleet Marshal. That means 32% impact, 16 nuclear detonations across our fleet. At minimum, we lose 8 capital ships and suffer critical damage to another 12. That's nearly 40% of our strike force, General, from one species, one planet, that we were supposed to conquer in 48 hours. And that's assuming they only launch 50 weapons, Zilla Reyes added. Her voice was trembling. Her scales had settled into a sickly gray that indicated severe stress. They claim to have 847. If they launch everything, they won't, Drakvin interrupted. They're bluffing. They have to be. No species we've encountered, Zarketh said quietly. His sensory tendrils were moving now, but slowly, thoughtfully. The movements of someone reassessing everything he thought he knew. Science Director, your earlier comment about humanity's developmental curve. Explain. Zelaris manipulated her interface. Data streams cascaded across the holographic display. Charts, graphs, historical records that painted a picture of a species that didn't follow any pattern the Dominion had ever encountered before. Most species follow logarithmic growth, steady, predictable advancement over millennia. But humans, she highlighted a graph that looked less like a curve and more like a cliff face. They went from horse-drawn carriages to nuclear weapons in 150 years, from no flight capability to landing on their own moon in 66 years, from their first orbital satellite to a permanent space station in 43 years. Your point, Drakvin demanded. My point of Fleet Marshal is that their rate of advancement is exponential, accelerating. If this pattern continues and if they reverse engineer our faster-than-light technology, they could match our capabilities within a single generation. Perhaps less. Zarketh felt something cold spreading through his core, the Dominion equivalent of dread. You're saying that if we leave them alone, they eventually become a threat anyway. I'm saying humanity is already a threat. We simply failed to recognize it because we were measuring them against our own developmental standards. By our metrics, they should still be struggling with basic spaceflight. Instead, they've weaponized their entire orbital space and developed a military doctrine based on the assumption that they will eventually face superior forces. They've been preparing for us, Corval said softly. Not for some theoretical future conflict. They've been specifically preparing for the moment when a technologically superior force would attempt conquest. It explains their nuclear arsenals, Zarketh mused. His mind was racing now, connecting pieces that should have been obvious from the start. They maintain weapons capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. What species does that unless they're planning to use them against someone else? A species that expects to be attacked, Zelaris answered. A species that has studied their own history and concluded that the strong always prey on the weak. So they made themselves strong enough that the cost of predation would be unacceptable. Drakvin was pacing now, his forelegs carrying him in agitated circles around the holographic display. So what do you propose, Commander, that we simply surrender? Accept humiliation, allow a primitive world to dictate terms to the Galactic Dominion. I propose we consider the actual strategic situation instead of reacting with wounded pride. Zarketh's voice was sharp, cutting through the Fleet Marshal's posturing like a blade. Ambassador Valeris gave us 3 options. Let's analyze them rationally. He pulled up a new display. 3 scenarios laid out with brutal clarity. Option 1, we withdraw. We lose face, but we maintain our fleet. Our dominion remains stable. Humanity has no reason to share their weapons technology. The status quo continues -1 potential conquest. Unacceptable, Drakvin growled. Option 2, we attack. Best case scenario, we destroy Earth's military capabilities before they can launch. We lose perhaps 10% of our fleet to conventional defenses. Worst case scenario, they launch everything. We lose 40% of our fleet. They still transmit their weapons data across the sector. We spend the next decades suppressing rebellions on every conquered world as they build kinetic kill vehicles in orbital nuclear platforms. Also unacceptable, Drakvin admitted, though his voice carried less certainty now. Option 3. We accept their surrender terms. We provide faster-than-light technology. We establish a mutual defense pact. We gain access to their unconventional weapons development in exchange for making them a protected member of the Dominion rather than a conquered one. That's not conquest, Drakvin protested. That's alliance. Exactly, Zarketh said, which means it's not what we came here to do, but it might be the smartest move available. Zalaris was nodding slowly, her scales gradually returning to a healthier color as she processed the logic. An alliance with Earth would have certain advantages. Their weapons technology, while primitive, is highly innovative. Kinetic kill vehicles require no power source, nearly undetectable. That alone would be valuable in asymmetric warfare scenarios. Plus, Corval added thoughtfully, if humans are as good at warfare as they claim, having them as allies instead of enemies makes tactical sense. Better to have the insane species that weaponizes gravity on our side. I need more information. Zarketh's decision was immediate, decisive, the command style that had led to 47 successful conquests. Zalaris, I want a complete analysis of human military history, every war they've fought, every weapon they've developed. I want to know if Ambassador Valeris was exaggerating or if we're actually looking at a species that outmilitarizes the Dominion. Understood, Commander. Zalaris was already pulling up data streams, her manipulators flying across the interface with practiced speed. Corval run additional combat simulations. Every possible scenario. I want to know our exact odds in a full engagement. Acknowledged. Drakvin review our intelligence on the conquered worlds. How many have the industrial capacity to build human-style weapons if given the technical specifications? The fleet marshal's aggressive posturing had evaporated, replaced by grim professionalism. The warrior underneath the pride. At least 23 worlds have sufficient manufacturing infrastructure, more if they cooperate with each other. So if humanity shares their weapons data, we potentially face 24 simultaneous rebellions, all armed with weapons specifically designed to counter our technological advantages. Zarketh leaned back, feeling the weight of command pressing down like a physical force. 47 worlds conquered, an unblemished record of military success. And now one small blue planet was about to either end his career or redefine it entirely. Commander? Zalaris made a sharp whistling sound, her version of alarm. You need to see this. She projected a new holographic display, a timeline. Thousands of data points representing human military conflicts across 5,000 years of recorded history. Zarketh watched transfixed as the pattern emerged. They've been in a state of warfare for 92% of their recorded history. Zalaris said, her voice hushed with something approaching awe. 92%, Commander. They have almost never been at peace. That's barbaric, Drakvin breathed. That's experience, Zarketh corrected, his eyes tracking the data, seeing the implications, understanding what it meant. Look at the tactical innovation. Every conflict introduces new weapons, new strategies, chemical weapons, biological agents, nuclear bombs, guided missiles, stealth technology, cyber warfare. They don't just fight wars. They revolutionize warfare with every engagement. Corval was highlighting specific conflicts. This one, their Second World War, 60 million casualties. They developed radar jet engines, ballistic missiles, and nuclear weapons all within 6 years. 6 years of technological advancement that would take most species 6 decades. Here, Zalaris added, pointing to another data cluster, their Cold War. They didn't fight directly, so instead they turned their entire civilization into a weapons development laboratory. Intercontinental missiles, satellite surveillance, stealth aircraft, computer encryption, all developed during a period of so-called peace. Zarketh was beginning to understand something profoundly disturbing about humanity. They didn't just prepare for war when war was imminent. They lived in a constant state of readiness, always developing, always innovating, always assuming the next conflict was just over the horizon, because for them it always was. Pull up their cultural data, he ordered. Entertainment, media, literature, art. Zalaris complied. The display flooded with information. Movies, books, games, all focused on conflict, and more specifically focused on one particular type of conflict. Alien invasions, Zalaris whispered. It's a major theme in their entertainment. Dozens of scenarios where humanity faces extinction from superior forces. They fantasize about this. They create entertainment about being invaded, Zarketh said slowly, the realization hitting him like a plasma bolt. About being conquered, about nearly being destroyed, and then fighting back. Ambassador Valeris didn't develop those strategies during this crisis. Her entire species has been theorizing, planning, and preparing for this exact scenario for generations. It's their dominant cultural narrative, Zilaris confirmed, pulling up more examples. The underdog who defeats overwhelming force. The primitive species that outsmarts the advanced empire. They've told themselves this story so many times that they believe it. More than believe it, they've made it their operational doctrine. Drakvin had stopped pacing. He was staring at the cultural data with something that looked like horrified fascination. We picked a fight with a species whose favorite pastime is imagining how to defeat us. Worse, Zarketh said. We picked a fight with a species that has been unified by nothing except external threats. Look at their history. Constant internal warfare. Thousands of separate nations and factions. But the moment they face an outside enemy, they unify instantly, Korval finished, pulling up the latest intelligence. Commander, since our ultimatum, every major human nation has ceased all hostilities with each other. Trade disputes resolved. Territorial conflicts suspended. Political division is set aside. They formed a unified planetary defense in less than 72 hours. Of course they have, Zarketh said bitterly. We did exactly what would make them most dangerous. We gave them a common enemy. We turned 8 billion fractious, divided, competitive humans into a single unified force with one goal: our defeat. A chime sounded, soft but insistent. Korval checked his display. 42 minutes elapsed since Ambassador Valeris's departure. 30 minutes remaining. 30 minutes to make a decision that would determine the fate of the Dominion. 30 minutes to choose between pride and pragmatism, between maintaining an image of invincibility and ensuring actual survival. Zarketh looked at his command staff, saw his own uncertainty reflected in every face. Combat simulation results. Now. Korval pulled up the data with movements that were reluctant, resigned. In every scenario where we initiate hostilities, we suffer unacceptable losses. Even our best-case projections result in 30% fleet casualties. Worst-case scenarios project total fleet annihilation. How? Drakvin demanded. They're primitives. They're primitives who fight dirty, Korval corrected. The simulations account for conventional warfare, but humans don't fight conventionally. According to their military history, they employ tactics like kamikaze attacks, suicide bombings, scorched earth policies. They will sacrifice everything to win. Or rather, he paused, making sure they understood. To make sure their enemy loses. There's a difference. Zilaris was nodding, her scales rippling with patterns of deep unease. Their nuclear doctrine isn't about victory. It's about ensuring mutual destruction. They're willing to fight if it means taking their enemy with them. That's not rational behavior. It's perfectly rational, Zarketh argued. If your opponent knows you will definitely retaliate even at the cost of your own destruction, they cannot threaten you. You become untouchable because the price of touching you is unacceptable. Ambassador Valeris wasn't bluffing when she said they'd fire everything. She was stating a mathematical certainty. 15 minutes remaining, the weight of it pressed down on all of them. 15 minutes to rewrite everything they understood about conquest, about power, about what it meant to be the dominant force in the galaxy. Zarketh made his decision. Option 3, he said finally. We accept their terms. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Option 3, we accept their terms. Drakvin's reaction was immediate, visceral. Commander, the Council will demand explanations. Our reputation will survive. Zarketh cut him off. His voice carried an edge of finality that silenced further protest. Our fleet might not. Besides, think about what we actually gain. Direct access to unconventional weapons technology. A military alliance with a species that specializes in asymmetric warfare. And most importantly, he paused, making sure they all understood. We avoid creating a precedent where conquered worlds realize they can resist us. Korval's armor made a thoughtful grinding sound. You mean we avoid giving them a template for rebellion? Exactly. If we crush Earth, every subjugated species sees their weapons data and starts building kinetic kill vehicles and orbital nuclear platforms. If we accept Earth as an ally, the other worlds see business as usual. The Dominion remains stable. We gain a dangerous partner instead of creating a dangerous enemy. Xylaris was reviewing the alliance terms that Kate had transmitted. Her scales had shifted to a cautious blue, hopeful but uncertain. The humans are requesting faster-than-light technology and full membership status in the Dominion. In exchange, they offer military consultation and technological cooperation on their weapon systems. Accept it, Zarketh decided. All of it. The High Council will demand justifications, a voice said. Velmara, the council representative who'd been silent until now, her concern was political, bureaucratic, the kind of worry that came from beings who'd never faced actual combat. How do we explain that we encountered a primitive species and chose alliance over conquest? We tell them the truth. Zarketh's voice was calm, certain. The voice of someone who'd made peace with a decision that would define the rest of his career. We tell them we encountered a species capable of inflicting catastrophic losses on our fleet, and instead of wasting resources in a Pyrrhic victory, we secured them as allies. Any council member who disagrees is welcome to come here and fight the humans themselves. Silence. The kind that comes when political calculation meets military reality and realizes it has no ground to stand on. 8 minutes remaining, Corval reported quietly. 8 minutes. Less time than it took to properly evaluate a diplomatic proposal. Less time than standard protocol required for fleet-level decisions. But Kate Valoris had given them 72 minutes and she'd meant it. The countdown wasn't symbolic. It was operational. A deadline with consequences. Zarketh straightened to his full height. 8 feet of command presence that had intimidated conquered species on 47 worlds. Send a transmission to Ambassador Valeris. Inform her that the Galactic Dominion accepts Earth's terms. We will sign a mutual defense pact and provide the requested technology. In exchange, Earth will maintain operational security regarding their weapon systems and provide military consultation as needed. Xylaris hesitated, just for a moment. Commander, are we certain this is wise? Once they have faster-than-light technology, they'll spread throughout the galaxy. In a generation, maybe 2, they could rival the Dominion itself. I know, Zarketh said quietly. His sensory tendrils moved in patterns of resignation, acceptance, understanding. But consider the alternative. If we attack them now, we create an enemy that will never stop, never forgive, never forget. They'll rebuild, they'll innovate, and eventually they'll come for us with weapons we can't even imagine yet. Better to have them inside the Dominion where we can monitor them, where we can benefit from their expertise, where their creativity serves us instead of destroys us. You're afraid of them, Drakvin said. It wasn't an accusation, it was an observation, a statement of fact from someone who was beginning to understand the same truth. Terrified, Zarketh admitted freely. The word felt strange. He'd conquered 47 worlds and never once admitted fear. But standing here looking at the data on humanity's capacity for violence and innovation and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat, fear was the only appropriate response. And that's exactly why this is the right decision. Fear is the appropriate response to a species that weaponizes gravity, that maintains enough nuclear weapons to sterilize their own planet, that considers mutually assured destruction to be a viable defensive strategy. 3 minutes remaining, Corval announced. Send the transmission, Zarketh ordered. Now. In the primitive shuttle docked within the Eternal Dominion's bay, Kate Valeris sat in the co-pilot seat with her eyes closed, not resting, calculating, running through scenarios in her mind with the precision of someone who'd wargamed this moment 10,000 times. Captain Dylan Mercer was watching the chronometer with the kind of attention usually reserved for countdown timers on explosives. 68 minutes elapsed, 4 minutes until Protocol Terminus. Protocol Terminus, the final option, the one that meant negotiation had failed and Earth was about to find out if 30 years of preparation was enough to survive first contact with a hostile galaxy. Kate had designed the protocol herself, had written the orders that would activate every weapons platform simultaneously, had calculated exactly how many Dominion ships would burn before Earth did. 40%, maybe 50 if they got lucky. And then 8 billion people would die knowing they'd taken 800 alien warships with them. Ma'am, Mercer said quietly, if they don't respond, they'll respond. Kate's voice was steady, absolute. They're running the same calculations we ran. They're seeing the same results. They'll respond. And if they decide to call our bluff, Kate opened her eyes, looked at the young officer who'd volunteered to fly her into the heart of an alien fleet knowing he might not come back. Then we find out if it was a bluff. The communication console chimed, once, sharp, insistent. Mercer's hand moved to the interface, paused. Incoming transmission from the flagship. It's It's addressed to you directly. Kate's heart was racing. She could feel it. The hammering pulse of adrenaline and fear and triumph all mixing together into something that felt like electricity in her veins. But her voice remained calm, professional. Accept the transmission. The view screen flickered. Zarketh Vorm's alien features resolved in holographic detail. His sensory tendrils were moving in patterns Kate had learned to read during her xenobiology briefings. Resignation, acceptance. The body language of someone who'd made a decision they didn't want to make but recognized as necessary. Ambassador Valeris. His voice carried through the translation matrix with perfect clarity. I hope you've had time to consider the gravity of what you've proposed. I've had 30 years to consider it, Commander. Kate's smile was small, controlled, not triumphant, not yet. I hope you've had time to consider your options. We have. A pause, long enough to be significant. The Galactic Dominion accepts Earth's terms. The words landed like a physical blow. Kate felt something in her chest release. Tension she'd been carrying for so long, it had become part of her baseline state. But she didn't let it show. Didn't let the relief reach her face. This was the moment that required absolute control, absolute professionalism. I'm pleased to hear that, Commander. I believe this is the beginning of a very productive partnership. As do we. Zarketh's image shifted slightly. Was he uncomfortable, uncertain? Hard to tell with alien body language. We will provide faster-than-light technology and recognize Earth's sovereignty. We welcome humanity as a full member, species of the Dominion. In exchange, Earth maintains operational security regarding our defensive capabilities and provides military consultation when requested. Kate finished. Yes, Commander, those terms are acceptable. I'll transmit the formal treaty documents for your review within the hour. Another pause. This one heavier, weighted with something Kate couldn't quite identify. Curiosity, respect, fear. Ambassador Valeris. Zarketh's voice was quieter now, almost conversational. Before we finalize this agreement, I must ask you something. Everything you told us about your weapons capabilities, the kinetic kill vehicles, the nuclear platforms, the information bomb, was it all true? Kate felt her smile return, sharper now. The smile of someone who'd played the most dangerous game of poker in human history and won. Would it matter if it wasn't, Commander? The silence that followed was profound. She could see understanding dawn in Zarketh's alien features. See him realize the beautiful, terrible truth of what she'd done. No, he said finally, a single word that carried the weight of empires. I suppose it wouldn't matter at all. Then I suggest we focus on the future rather than the past. Kate's voice was diplomatic again. Professional. The voice of someone ready to move forward. The treaty documents will outline our technical cooperation proposals. I think you'll find them quite reasonable. I'm certain we will. There was something in Zarketh's tone that might have been admiration, or might have been the kind of respect that comes from being outmaneuvered by someone you'd underestimated. The Dominion looks forward to working with humanity, Ambassador Valeris. The transmission ended, the view screen went dark. For exactly 5 seconds, Kate sat absolutely still. Then she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Captain Mercer. Ma'am, send a priority transmission to General Thorne. Message reads, treaty accepted. Stand down from alert status. Repeat, stand down from alert status. Earth is no longer at war. Mercer's hands were shaking slightly as he typed the message. Ma'am, we just became the first species in Dominion history to join as equals instead of conquered subjects. Kate was looking at her father's watch again, the mechanical movement still ticking, still keeping time, just like it had through 37 bombing missions over Germany, just like it had through every impossible moment of her father's war. Yes, Captain, we actually did. The formal treaty signing took place 6 hours later aboard the Eternal Dominion. Not in the War Council chamber, but in a neutral diplomatic space that the Dominion maintained for occasions that required ceremony rather than strategy. Kate entered the room, flanked by General Harlan Thorne and Dr. Evelyn Cross. Behind them, a security detail from Earth's newly unified planetary command. Symbolic, ceremonial, but also a statement. Humanity was coming to the table as partners, not supplicants. Zarketh was already there with his command staff. Drakvin looked like he'd swallowed something bitter, but was too professional to comment. Zalaris's scales were a cautious green. Korval's armor was polished to a mirror finish. Even Valmara had manifested via holographic presence, representing the political authority of the High Council. The treaty itself was displayed on a holographic interface between them. Legal language in multiple formats, human text, dominion glyphs, mathematical notation that transcended species-specific communication. It was, Kate thought, surprisingly simple for something that was about to reshape galactic politics. Article 1, mutual recognition of sovereignty and territorial rights. Article 2, exchange of technological knowledge as specified in attached schedules. Article 3, mutual defense pact with clearly defined obligations and limitations. Article 4, consultation protocols for military operations within overlapping areas of interest. The details went on for another 60 pages. But those 4 articles were the foundation, the structure upon which everything else rested. Before we proceed, Zarketh said formally, I must state for the record that the Galactic Dominion enters this alliance of our own free will, recognizing Earth as a sovereign entity and humanity as equals within the interstellar community. Kate appreciated the phrasing. Equals, not subjects, not conquered peoples. Equals. It was a word that mattered, a word that would echo through every Dominion world when news of this treaty spread. And Earth, Kate responded with equal formality, enters this alliance committed to peaceful cooperation and mutual benefit. We seek partnership, not conflict. We offer our knowledge and capabilities in service of stability and security for all member species. The diplomatic dance continued for another 20 minutes. Statements, clarifications, assurances that both sides would honor the spirit and letter of the agreement. It was theater, necessary theater, the kind of performance that created legitimacy in the eyes of observers. Finally, Zarketh extended one of his 4 appendages toward the holographic interface. On behalf of the Galactic Dominion, I sign this treaty of alliance and cooperation. His gesture created a signature in light, a complex glyph that represented his authority and his commitment. Kate stepped forward, placed her hand on the interface. Her signature was simple by comparison, just her name in English script, but it carried the weight of 8 billion people behind it, the hopes of an entire species that had just taken its first real step into a larger galaxy. On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I sign this treaty. The holographic display flashed. The signatures merged, locked, became official in whatever distributed ledger system the Dominion used to track legal agreements across light years of space. It was done. The room erupted in the alien equivalent of applause. Chittering, cheering, buzzing, harmonic sounds that Kate's xenobiology training suggested meant approval or satisfaction, or perhaps just relief that a potential catastrophe had been averted. Zarketh approached her, extended his appendage again, this time not for a signature, but for what Kate recognized as the Dominion equivalent of a handshake, a gesture of respect between equals. She met it with her own hand. The contact was strange, alien, but also somehow significant, historic. The moment when 2 species that could have destroyed each other chose cooperation instead. You played a dangerous game, Ambassador Valorous, Zarketh said quietly enough that the translation matrix would keep it between them. You bet your entire planet on your ability to convince us that resistance would be too costly. And you made the intelligent choice, Commander Vorm. Kate's voice was equally quiet. You could have tested my claims, could have called what you thought was a bluff, but you calculated the worst and decided survival was more important than pride. Tell me truthfully. His sensory tendrils moved in patterns Kate still couldn't fully interpret. The weapons, the platforms, the threats of information sharing. How much of it was real? Kate's smile was enigmatic, carefully calibrated to give nothing away. Does it matter, Commander? You believed it was real. That belief changed your decision. That's all that matters. But you know what was real and what was theater. And that knowledge gives you power over this alliance. Over me. No, Commander. Kate's voice was gentle, almost kind. That knowledge gives us both uncertainty, because I'll never tell you what was bluff and what was capability. And that uncertainty means you'll always treat Earth as if every threat we made was absolutely real, which means we never have to prove it, which means we can maintain peace through mutual respect instead of through mutual destruction. Understanding flickered across Zarketh's alien features. You're using the same doctrine against me now. Mutually assured destruction doesn't require actual weapons. It only requires the belief that those weapons exist. Now you're learning. Kate's smile widened slightly. Welcome to Human Strategic Thinking, Commander. I think you're going to find our partnership very educational. The Dominion fleet began its departure from Earth orbit 6 hours after the treaty signing. 1,847 warships that had arrived as conquerors, leaving as what allies partners? Something more complicated than simple friendship, but less hostile than enemies. Kate watched from the observation deck of the International Space Station as the massive vessels moved away from Earth, their dark hulls creating moving shadows against the starfield. Beautiful in their own way, terrible, powerful, but no longer threatening. General Thorne stood beside her, his reflection visible in the reinforced viewport. You know they're going to spend the next decade trying to figure out what was real and what was bluff. Good, Kate said simply. Let them wonder. Let every species in the Dominion wonder. Let the uncertainty work for us instead of against us. But we do have the weapons. It wasn't a question. Thorne had been there from the beginning, had overseen the construction of every kinetic platform, every orbital nuclear installation. He knew what was real. Most of them, Kate admitted. The kinetic kill vehicles are all real. 2,340 tungsten rods, exactly where I said they were. The nuclear platforms? She paused. We have 847 missiles retrofitted for orbital deployment. Whether they'd all work simultaneously, whether our targeting systems could handle coordinating that many launches, that's a different question. And the information bomb, the threat to broadcast our weapons specifications to every conquered world. Kate's smile was sharp. That protocol exists. We could trigger it. But whether the conquered worlds have the industrial capacity to actually build the weapons, whether they'd risk rebellion, even with the technical knowledge, that's uncertain. But Zarketh didn't know that. He couldn't afford to assume it was bluff. So we won by making them afraid of possibilities. We won by making them calculate the cost and realize they couldn't afford to pay it. That's not the same as bluffing. That's just good strategy. Kate turned away from the viewport. Besides, now that we have FTL technology, in 10 years, we really will be able to match them. The threat was always real. We just compressed the timeline in their minds. You gambled 8 billion lives on psychological warfare. I gambled 8 billion lives on the assumption that any species smart enough to build an interstellar empire would be smart enough to recognize a no-win scenario when they saw one. Kate's voice was steady, certain. And I was right. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Then your father would be proud. Kate touched her watch. The mechanical movement was still keeping perfect time, still ticking away the seconds the way it had for 80 years. He'd probably say I was insane. Then he'd buy me a drink and ask for a detailed mission debrief. What happens now? Now, Kate looked back at the viewport, at the planet rotating below them, blue and green and beautiful and still intact, still alive. Now we start building. We have FTL technology to reverse engineer, trade agreements to negotiate, military cooperation protocols to establish. And we have to do it all while maintaining the image that we're exactly as dangerous as I convinced them we are. Can we sustain that image? We don't have to sustain it. We just have to become it. We told them we're the species that weaponizes gravity and refuses to surrender. So that's what we become. We make it true retroactively. She smiled. Besides, they gave us 72 hours to surrender. We gave them 72 minutes to accept our terms. I think we've established that humanity operates on a different timeline than the rest of the galaxy expects. 3 months later, news of the treaty reached the furthest edges of Dominion space. The response was complicated. Some species saw it as proof that resistance was possible, that the Dominion could be challenged, could be forced to negotiate rather than simply conquer. Rebellion stirred on 14 worlds, carefully, quietly, but it stirred. Other species saw it as opportunity. If Earth could join as equals, perhaps others could renegotiate their terms. Perhaps subjugation wasn't permanent. Perhaps the galactic order wasn't as fixed as it had seemed for 300 years. The Dominion High Council was divided. Half saw the alliance with Earth as dangerous precedent. The other half saw it as brilliant strategy. Better to have humanity inside the empire than outside it. Better to harness their innovation than face it as enemies. But every species, every world, every council chamber across 500 light years had the same conversation. The same question that nobody could quite answer. What exactly were humans capable of? The uncertainty was intentional, cultivated. Kate had seeded just enough information to make capabilities plausible without providing proof. Kinetic kill vehicles were real and demonstrable. But how many what other weapons existed? What was humanity keeping secret? Nobody knew. Not even the Dominion's intelligence services could penetrate Earth's security sufficiently to separate fact from strategic deception. And that uncertainty became humanity's greatest weapon. Because as long as nobody knew exactly what Earth could do, everyone had to assume Earth could do anything. 5 years after First Contact Ambassador Catherine Valeris stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where she'd accepted the mission to negotiate with the Dominion fleet. But the room was different now, enhanced with alien technology, displays that could show real-time data from installations across 3 star systems, communication equipment that could reach ships traveling faster than light. Earth had changed. Humanity had changed. In 5 years, they'd gone from isolated world to active participant in galactic politics. Human ships now traveled with Dominion fleets on peacekeeping missions. Human engineers worked alongside alien scientists on projects that spanned light years. Human strategic doctrine was being studied in military academies across a dozen worlds. The species that had threatened to weaponize gravity had become the species that actually did it. And more. Much more. General Thorne entered the briefing room with a tablet displaying mission reports from the outer colonies. Humanity had established 3 settlements on previously uninhabited worlds, each one defended by orbital weapons platforms that made even Dominion commanders nervous. "The Council is requesting our assistance with the Sector 7 rebellion," he said without preamble. "They want human strategic consultation on how to suppress the uprising without destroying the planet's industrial capacity." Kate looked at the mission parameters, studied the data, calculated the implications. "Tell them we'll send advisors, but we won't help them suppress rebellions. We'll help them negotiate settlements that prevent rebellions from being necessary." They won't like that. They don't have to like it. They just have to recognize that we provide value through consultation, not through becoming their enforcers. Kate's voice was firm. "We join the Dominion as equals. That means we have the right to decline missions that conflict with our values. And if they push back, then we remind them what happened when they tried to push us before." Kate smiled, the same dangerous smile she'd shown Zarketh 5 years ago. "We remind them that uncertainty works both ways. They're never quite sure what we'll do if they cross certain lines, and that uncertainty keeps them polite." She looked at the display showing Earth, the planet that had refused to surrender, the species that had bet everything on being too dangerous to conquer and too valuable to destroy. It had worked, not through superior technology, not through overwhelming force, but through strategy, through psychology, through the careful cultivation of uncertainty and the willingness to gamble on human stubbornness being stronger than alien patience. "You know what the Dominion species call us now?" Thorne asked. "I've heard several names. The species that said no. That's the one that stuck. The species that looked at overwhelming force and refused to accept the inevitable." He paused. "There's a recruiting slogan circulating on the outer worlds. If humans can resist, so can we. Is that a problem?" "For the Dominion, yes. For us." Thorne smiled. "I think it's exactly the reputation we want. The species that proved resistance is possible. The species that changed the galaxy just by refusing to accept that change was impossible." Kate thought about her father, about the watch on her wrist that had survived 37 missions over hostile territory, about the kind of courage it took to fly into danger and knowing the odds were against survival, but going anyway because the mission mattered more than the risk. He would understand what she'd done, what humanity had done, the gamble they'd taken, the bluff they'd run, the way they'd turned weakness into strength through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. "You gave us 3 days to surrender," she said quietly, repeating the words she'd told Zarketh 5 years ago. "You didn't last 3 seconds once we showed you what that trigger would cost. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity wouldn't have it any other way." Somewhere in deep space aboard a Dominion research vessel, Xyla Urs reviewed her latest analysis of human technological development. 5 years of data. 5 years of trying to understand how one species could advance so quickly, could innovate so relentlessly, could turn every challenge into an opportunity for growth. Her scales flickered through colors of confusion and grudging admiration. Humans didn't just adapt to new technology, they revolutionized it. FTL drives that the Dominion had refined over 3 centuries, humans had improved the efficiency by 11% in 5 years. Weapon systems that had been static for generations, humans had integrated them with kinetic platforms to create hybrid systems nobody had imagined. But what disturbed her most, what kept her scales shifting through anxious patterns, was the realization she'd had 3 years into studying human culture. They were still hiding things, even as allies, even as partners. Even as they shared technology and fought alongside Dominion forces, humans maintained operational security on certain projects, certain research initiatives, certain capabilities that they politely declined to discuss. What else did they have? What other weapons had Kate Valoris been hinting at when she said, "Imagine what we're keeping secret"? Zalaris didn't know. Nobody knew. And that uncertainty, that carefully maintained mystery, kept everyone in the Dominion just uncertain enough to treat Earth with respect, with caution, with the kind of careful diplomacy usually reserved for equals or superiors, which she supposed was exactly the point. The humans had taught the galaxy something profound, something that would reshape interstellar relations for generations to come. The most dangerous species isn't the one with the biggest weapons. It's the one with the wisdom to make you uncertain about what weapons they actually have, and the willingness to use that uncertainty as a weapon more powerful than any bomb. Earth had joined the galactic dominion not through conquest or submission, but through a demonstration of a truth that would echo across the stars for centuries. Humanity had looked at impossible odds and said one simple word: no. And somehow impossibly, that had been enough.